thinking a lot about the unhinged reaction from the left over things like deporting violent gang members and increasing government efficiency and cutting out waste and fraud and securing the border and lowering prices and inflation. Been thinking about the unhinged reaction from many people in our country, and it kind of occurred to me last night. The actual reaction we're witnessing is the behavior of children. And what do you do when children misbehave? I think we would get some clarity if we can focus our attention on how you react. I mean, I watched a clip, I don't want to make you suffer through it, 5 minutes of the ladies on The View all arguing amongst themselves about whether Democrats are fighting back hard enough. I don't know what they expect people to do. And Whoopi Goldberg concluded it all by saying, we gotta take to the streets. And they're taking to the streets all right. The problem with that mindset is when you tell people to take to the streets, a segment of that population is committing violence. They're hurting people. They're hurting people's property. They're hurting people's livelihoods. What do you think Tim Walz does when he roots for Tesla to fail? One of the biggest blunders I've ever seen a politician make. Think about an American governor joking and taunting and bragging about hoping Tesla fails, especially when we found out that a portion of Minnesota's own pension fund is invested in Tesla. So he wants his own retirees to get hurt. It's not funny. I guess he was trying to be cute. That's as clever as him trying to say he's going to kick all of our butts. He's going to beat us all up. That's Tim Walz, one of the strangest men to ever run for national office. And they wonder why the Kamala Harris-Tim Walz ticket didn't succeed. Incidentally, speaking of the Kamala ticket, it's no secret that Donald Trump used to be beloved by Democrats. Remember when I came across a Comedy Central roast of Donald Trump? Have you ever seen the roast of Comedy Central? Tracy, can you find out what year that took place? I think Snoop Dogg was there and Chris Rock. There was a whole bunch of, mainstream entertainers, and it was a roast on Comedy Central. One night late at night, I was channel surfing, and I came across it, and it was an old episode. You know how they do those roasts on Comedy Central with celebrities? And the roast of Donald Trump included one of the roasters saying to the roastee, Donald J. Trump, you should run for president someday. And the whole room erupted in roars of approval. The same people that now despise him used to be egging him on, wanting him to run for president. So I've been thinking about a hypothetical that came from a texter who wrote me today and said they loved Trump until he ran as a Republican for president. That got me to thinking, what if Trump had run as a Democrat and won? Do you know the same people that are condemning him today would be absolutely singing his praises? It's almost like, I think we're making a mistake. Well, I think we're making a mistake. We're acting like the lunatic, unhinged, crazy responses to things like public safety, border security, lowering inflation, deporting violent gang members. We're acting like that's rational, normal discourse. And it really isn't. There are things to have rational, normal discourse over. We can go down some things. We can have a debate about whether it's a good idea to abolish the Department of Education, like Trump is planning to do. That's okay. Maybe you disagree with that. That's okay. Let's talk about it. Let's have the discussion. It's okay to talk about the dramatic way DOGE is cutting thousands and thousands of jobs. It's okay. I think it's okay to have the debate about rogue judges trying to stop him and winding its way up to the Supreme Court. That's okay. What's not okay is destruction and damage and violence. What's not, and somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get killed. You know that in your heart. You know it's coming. That's not okay. And to Whoopi Goldberg or to Jasmine Crockett or to Tim Walz or to anybody else advocating taking to the streets, taking Tesla down, hurting Tesla, you are inciting domestic terrorism. And I believe there's going to be a reckoning for these people. They're going to have to be held accountable. Just like the dummies who are vandalizing Tesla cars and they're too stupid to remember that there are 9 cameras on the exterior of that car and something called Sentry Mode, and what you do to a Tesla is being recorded and it's kept in the cloud, and then the police are going to review that and they're going to come arrest you. And under the Trump administration, you are going to be charged with domestic terrorism. This isn't just some penny ante, damaging a car. You're a domestic terrorist, period. And you're going to likely spend a lot of time behind bars. So you ought to think about that when you consider vandalizing somebody else's property. This is the behavior of children. These are childish, infantile responses. You know how there's a mantra, there's a narrative emerging from the Democrat Party that this is not a time for normal discourse. I would agree with that. You can't have normal discourse with people who praise Luigi Mangione. It's impossible to have regular, normal conversations with somebody who carry "Long Live Hamas" banners. You can't have a normal conversation, an adult conversation, with people who don't behave like adults. So I guess I'm going to turn it over to you here. This is going to be a good hour, too, because a little bit later, we're going to visit with Kurt Schlichter, who wrote a piece years ago that none of us can find, including Colonel Kurt, about the normals. But he can articulate it quite well. And we're going to talk about this conflict, this showdown we're having in America between us normals and the bat crap crazy people who don't know what to do with Republican leadership. But I'm going to ask you, how do you handle, or how do you respond to, how do you react to childish, off the charts, unhinged rhetoric and actions? What do we do with the protesters and the opposition to the Trump administration, considering how crazed they've become? What's the proper response? Do we just ignore them? Do we take them on? Do you confront them? Or do you just let them scream and yell and hold their breath until they turn blue? What do you think is the proper response?
Mike Gallagher.
Here's a text message from Wisconsin. These are not children. These are thugs. They are morally corrupt. Perhaps, but there are reasonable people on every side of every argument. In fact, I saw last night Congressman Ro Khanna. Now, he's a Democrat from California, but I want you to hear what a Democrat... Look, I say this all the time. We got to be careful not to attack everybody who says, well, I'm not a Republican, I'm a Democrat. Well, that doesn't mean you're a loony. That doesn't mean you're a thug, violent, endorsing criminal. In fact, let me give you an example. Here was Congressman Ro Khanna, remember, Democrat from California of all places, with an entirely reasonable adult reaction to things that are happening in this country from his perspective as a Democrat.
Has it crossed the line when people are sort of rooting for the failure of a company?
Well, first, let me say, until yesterday, I think I was one of the only Democratic elected officials to unambiguously condemn the violence and destruction against Tesla. I don't think you have to be tough on crime to do that. As you know, my grandfather is part of Gandhi's Satyagraha movement, independence movement. He said sabotage is a form of violence. I mean, this is not the best form of protest, and it's not the tradition. The second point is, I'm not going to root against Tesla. There are 20,000 people who work in my district who make a living off this. They're building electric vehicles that ultimately are good for the climate. I have huge, huge problems with what Elon Musk is doing. Have the protest and the conversation and criticism of Musk. Don't take it out on a company where you have workers, where you have engineers, where you have scientists, which are creating wealth for the country, which is helping the climate. And I think Democrats have to be able to offer common sense perspectives, focus on what the problem is with Musk. Don't focus on the wealth of a company.
I tease some of my colleagues, one in particular, for being a kind of a beltway talk show host, an establishment guy. He's a friend of mine. You know who I'm talking about. And I know that Ro Khanna is one of his favorite guests. Well, that's why. And we shouldn't run from intelligent, sophisticated, adult debate. Ro Khanna, a Democrat from California, is completely plausible in what he just said. And look, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. If Democrats started talking like him, they'd start winning elections again. I don't know that they're smart enough to figure it out. They're all caught up in their own theatrics and their childish temper tantrums. If there were more Ro Khannas in the Democrat Party, they'd have a lot more success. Let's see what you think. 800-655-MIKE. Here's Ted in Venice, Florida. Ted, welcome back. What do you think is the right way to handle these protesters and respond to these people who are off the charts?
Mike, I love you. I'm a Republican Trump supporter. I listen when I can almost every day. But
thank you, Ted. I appreciate that very much. You're very kind.
I mean that sincerely.
Thank you.
I just think the response from conservative networks and all of this has been way too much coverage of this.
Yeah.
This is a minority of people in the country that are acting like idiots. And back to Ro Khanna for an example. Bill Maher, Ro Khanna, they all try to sound reasonable. But let's not fool ourselves, conservatives. They're going to vote liberal every time.
Well, of course they are. But Ted, I have to ask you, didn't what you just heard sound reasonable from Ro Khanna?
Yes, it sounds reasonable, but these very same people he will turn on a dime if he sees the chance to win an election.
I know.
And they are about grasping power. And we can never forget that. And when we highlight this foolishness they're doing, and on Fox every day there's what's the Democrats going to do to rebuild their party? Why do we care?
I know.
That's never rebuild.
Let them figure it out. Why? Yeah. Why should we be part of helping them figure it out? I get that. On the other hand, when you highlight the insanity, we're reminded, I think, importantly, of what today's 2025 Democrat Party looks like. I'll ask Kurt Schlichter that question because it's a good question, Ted. It's a good issue, and I appreciate, again, your kind words. That means a lot to me, too. Should we be giving these protests all this attention, or should we try to ignore it? The great Kurt Schlichter, townhall.com, next.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.